Welcome back to Chevrons, a podcast for the enlisted force. If you're new here, welcome. I'm your host, Airman First Class Julia A. Hasey, and I'm a public affairs specialist for the Massachusetts National Guard. This podcast offers advice and guidance for all military members from all branches for personal and professional development. Today on the podcast, we have Senior Enlisted Advisor Tony L. Whitehead, who holds the highest enlisted level of leadership in the National Guard. The National Guard's SEA is a rank, not a title. SEA is the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., serving as the Chief's principal military advisor on all enlisted matters affecting training, utilization, health of the force, and enlisted professional development. He directs the enlisted force, airmen and soldiers from all 50 states, 3 territories in the District of Columbia. SEA ensures they have a voice in the decision-making process and represents their interests. In this episode, we're going to hear from SEA Whitehead about his story, his advice for the enlisted force, and all he has learned during his decades of service. SEA, welcome to the podcast. We are excited and honored to have you on today.
Great to be here.
So I'd like to start off by hearing your story before the uniform. So what's your story?
All right, now, when I tell you, I don't want you to get all sad or bored because it started a long time ago. But I joined the military in 1982, so obviously that means that was the same year I graduated from high school when I was 18. I come from a family of there's 8 siblings, single mother, and there were 5 different fathers between us 8 kids. And so it was a challenge in one, the community, and 2, with us to understand who we were and what that dynamic looked like. And what you find is that where we were living, that was, it wasn't the standard story, but we were in an area where, you had those unique blends of families. And so my brothers and sisters and I really relied on one another. That was my, growth and development as a child. Mom worked sometimes 2 jobs. And so the opportunity to really get to know people was something that was interesting to me. I didn't realize that I was an introvert or that it would be something that would actually help me. And I think one of the things I got from it best was I became a student of people. I love watching people, understanding what made them tick and how you can best interact with them to get the best out of them. Didn't think that was something that I was doing when I was young, but it ended up being that way.
I'd love to hear next about your military story. How did your growing up lead you to the military, and what inspired you to join after the way that you grew up?
Well, I tell you what, that's part of the the background story too. So there was 5 sisters and 3 brothers, or should I say 5 girls, 3 boys, and the standing order was basically once you became 18 years of age, you're going to work and go to school, or you're going to work. So you couldn't go to school full time and not work. And at that time, the military had unbelievable access to our high schools and our communities. And so we were having ASVAB tests being done on us even while we were in the 11th grade. And both my brothers joined the United States Army, right out of high school, one a little longer. And then, of course, when it came for me, I didn't know what I was going to do. And who knows? I said the Army may have been it, but once I met a E6 named Tech Sergeant Melissa Outlaw, things changed. And I thought about, this could be pretty cool. And I saw the video of the security forces, or should I say security specialists back then. And they were doing some really cool stuff. They were actually, doing some rappelling. And I was like, wow, I think that's what I want to try. And so I joined the United States Air Force as a security specialist through the delayed enlistment program, which is a little different, but I kind of liked it. So it kind of gave me an idea, to say, hey, is this what I really want to do? And I ended up joining. So before I even graduated from high school, I was already almost a member of the United States Air Force. And then, of course, after I turned 18 and I graduated, didn't realize that they still had to have me sign more papers. So they kind of sneaked that in on me, but it was okay. And ended up joining the United States Air Force.
So after you joined security forces, what were your goals at the time, and then where did you head next?
Oh, wow. So that's an interesting question, because when I joined, I had no idea what I was going to do. All I knew was that, I had already been working, before I joined, part-time, things of that nature. But here I am working full-time, and, I'm in Texas, so didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do or be other than security specialist or security forces. And I found myself in South Dakota, and I'm like, what in the world was I thinking? But, I joined 6 years, and so I was able to get a stripe out of it, not too long after I got there. But it was still some work to be done because back then it was the Strategic Air Command. And if anybody that's listening to us now knows about SAC, as they called it, that was pretty tough. That was the world of missiles. And it was something that was very, very highly regarded. So I was very blessed to be a part of that. But it was also a place you wanted to avoid because there was a lot of work and not too much downtime. So a 6-year enlistment, and I had no idea that I was going to continue to serve in the United States Air Force or the Armed Forces. I just thought that, hey, I'll find out what's happening here. If I can become, something because of it, I would do it. But interestingly enough, I got the bug and I decided that it was a place I wanted to be.
So that was active duty. You joined as an airman basic, and then you spent over a decade active duty in security forces, or security specialist, as it was back then, at several key overseas bases.
Yeah.
What prompted you to move to the National Guard, and what was that transition like?
So just based on the way you asked that question, is pretty cool. Leaving South Dakota, I had a chance to go to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan, and that's when it kind of hit me that I was starting to experience different walks of life, people from around the world, and in a place where first I didn't like, and I think a few months later I realized I really did like it there because the weather reminded me of Florida, Okinawa did. And going from there to Korea, and from Korea to Howard Air Force Base in Panama, and in between having an opportunity to go to the Philippines, go to Australia, go to Hawaii, the mainland Japan, things of that nature. It was a pretty awesome experience. But when I got to Korea and I was getting ready to leave, my sister informed me that my mom had cancer. And so it was like, okay, we'll see what happens. And I said, well, just wait and see if it's something that's serious enough for there to be a change in your assignment. And while I was there, and it's only a 1-year assignment, eventually got transferred to Howard Air Force Base. And it was at the end of Operation Just Cause. And while we were there, got another call that it was starting to change. And eventually, then it was like, okay, what do we do? And I was in a position to where I was able to ask for a humanitarian reassignment. And I got one to Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia. Not a bad place, but it still wasn't Panama, which was pretty cool. And eventually I decided that I was going to get out. And when I did, and I'm a pretty decisive person most of the times, and I decided I was going to go and just be a civilian again. And so I got out of the United States Air Force in 1992. And that was after being in for 10 years.
So then you got out and you became a civilian, and then did you join the National Guard after a little while being a civilian? You did go right to the National Guard after duty. What was that transition like for you?
So neat story, maybe. It was a few months after I'd gotten out, and I was getting that bug of, the camaraderie that you miss working with people, especially in the Defender world. And I was at an ATM on a Sunday night, and I saw this guy. His name was Mitch Devereaux. He's since retired. And he was wearing his Security Forces beret. And I was wondering, what is he doing in Jacksonville, Florida, wearing a Security Forces beret? I had no idea that there was an F-15 unit that was right there in Jacksonville, Florida, at the international airport. And so I talked to him for a little bit and thought about it, went home, and was like, this might be a pretty cool thing to do. And I got 10 years in, I might as well go back and finish up. And so several months later, I go out there and I'm looking around. I was like, well, this is pretty small. But I met some of the people there. Some were crazy, but for the most part, I want to tell you, it kind of lends to the idea that Guard is family. And so I joined the Air National Guard in April of '94. And so it was I had about an 18-month break-in service.
I really appreciate how you said the National Guard is family. I mean, I see that here in my unit, only being here for 2 years, and just all the people I've met along the way, and all the mentors too that I've met as just the 2 years that I've been here. Have you had great role models or mentors throughout your time in the Guard or even active duty?
Oh yeah, I had a great one, and we still stay in contact from active duty. His name is Anthony Murray. At the time that I met him, he was a senior master sergeant. He was security forces / law enforcement superintendent. And one of the things he taught me to do was to make sure that when I showed up to work, I was present. And of course, obviously being a very young senior airman, I had no idea what that meant. But what he meant was when you show up for work, you need to be there. People need to know that you're there, and you need to know that that's where you are, as opposed to thinking about being someplace else. And it's one of those things that's pretty noticeable as leaders, and especially subordinates. Just think about it. When your boss comes in and you can see it in their face that, one, either there's something wrong, or two, they give you the impression that they will want to be someplace else other than that. And Senior Mirror was extremely intentional about making sure that, he understood that we needed to understand that he was there and he was there for us. And I never forgot that. And he also taught me this thing called Aloha Fridays. And it was just about at some point in time, you need to take a break from work and just really get to know the people that you're working with. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I never forgot that.
To be fully present, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and you also do know your people, so you know how to take care of them.
You're kind of cheating because that's something I'll talk about at the end, but it's okay that you brought that up and you highlighted that. But I think that's extremely important. And then, of course, once I joined the National Guard, totally different setup to where it was smaller. So you really got to know people, and you got to understand what made them tick. And of course, you got to realize that, hey, there are a lot of people out here with the same last name. So not only was it a family business from the perspective of last names, but people just really, really talked up the National Guard to where those that were around them really wanted to be a part of it because they saw what it was doing to the people that were in uniform. So they wanted to make sure that if there was a chance for them to share that wealth, they would. And those who wanted to promote it, they did. And I was very proud of that.
Yeah, that happened to me. I mean, I learned about the National Guard from family, from friends, and a lot of people that I know that are in learned about it from someone that they knew. Just the great benefits that it has and just how much they enjoy really being in the Guard.
One of the things I didn't understand was a drill weekend, which I thought was really great because, going out there to fill out the paperwork, throughout the month, I didn't see very many people, so I didn't know what that was like. And then when I showed up for my first drill and I saw all of these people, it was like the base just came to life. It was a really cool thing to see. And I was like, wow, so this is what this National Guard is about. And then you start meeting people from different walks of life. They've got different civilian careers, different family makeups. Some live across town, some live, several miles away. And you find out that those have been out there for 20, 30 years. And I'm thinking, how do you do that? How do you come to one location? And then you realize you kind of grow up right in the midst of everything and everyone that you're a part of.
That's a beautiful thing about the Guard and something that I've really admired since I've joined. So you briefly talked about that mentor that you had. What qualities do you think makes a good mentor and a good mentee for that matter?
Ooh, a good mentee. You know what? I'm going to take the mentee first. How about that? I think being patient. I'll probably go on both sides. But I also think humility. That's really tough for a lot of us, especially if you join the Guard, maybe later in life, or you've experienced some things. You're a pretty smart person, which it sounds like you are, and you got your stuff together. You're thinking, well, how much am I going to learn? But it takes humility to do that, and it takes growing some tough skin early in life, and that can be early in your career. What I mean by that is this: the toughest thing to do is to hear sometimes the word no, to hear you're not ready yet, and to hear maybe this isn't for you. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful. That doesn't mean that what you want to go for that you can't get. It just means that it may not be right now. And you have to be ready to hear that. But hopefully you're hearing it to be challenged to want to be and do more and not to shut down. And sometimes that's something that needs to be taught, and it's not taught enough about. And I thank you for that question about being a good mentee because we don't talk about that enough. And I think also part of being a good mentee is taking notes. I learned that from someone a long time ago. Is hey, don't walk into a room where there's all these people who've got all these years of experience, and you don't have a notebook in your hand. Just think about it. You've got decades of experience, maybe even hundreds of years of experience around you. And you walk in nothing in your hands, not even your phone, which you have today, and you walk out as if, I got nothing from it. And the reality is there's something to take away from every opportunity to be around senior non-commissioned officers, commissioned officers, and believe it or not, sometimes your peers are those that just have one more stripe than you, because it's not always about the military experience. It can be about life experiences. So that to me is extremely important when it comes to being a good mentee. Now, being a good mentor, I'm going to throw one out there that I talk about a lot, and it's about understanding and employing emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is, that's a pretty, it's not complicated, but it's one that takes time, and it takes patience too. And I'm going to call you Julia. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Julia, I got to tell you, this is one where I think it really pays dividends for supervisors, mentors, the whole organization. You've got to be able to employ emotional intelligence. And I had a supervisor, his name was Mike Gainey. He talked about mentors, and he talked about understanding and appreciating the intelligence and the experience of your subordinates. Because how do I know how to lead, guide, and motivate you if I don't take the time to get to know you, to understand you, and realize that you've had some experiences that I've never had? And so if I don't talk to you and get to understand you, I won't know how to communicate with you effectively on how to motivate you, whether it be positive reinforcement or, maybe a little kick in the rear, just to say, hey, I know you better than this. You're better than this. These are things that I know that you're capable of doing. So I'm going to push you a little further than you're actually pushing yourself. But I think emotional intelligence too, also, it lets you understand that people have some amazing skill sets that we have to spend some quality time getting to know them and getting to know ourselves better to bring out the best in them. And I think that's one of those things that I believe has helped me be I'll say a decent leader. How about that?
I think that it's been so important for a lot of me and my peers to learn how to take criticism and be open to feedback and be constantly seeking out that feedback as well. And like you said about being a good mentor, I tend to seek out feedback from people who I feel like know me well and take the time to know me and invest in my career and even in my personal life. So I think I have learned a lot from mentors who have done that for me. So I appreciate you saying that as well, getting to know your subordinates and supporting them and leading them where they are rather than where you want them to be. Just getting them to where they want to be and knowing how to get them there based off who they are personally. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Just think about it. There are people that you have met over the course of however many years you've been in, or even before you got in. As soon as they walk in the door, you know that there's something wrong. Or that energy that they usually bring into the workplace or into the space is not there. And so it's absolutely nothing wrong with asking, hey, what's up with you? That can lead to so many other things. And it goes down that path of things like finding out that, that somebody may have been sexually assaulted, or there may be issues with them personally that they may have suicidal ideations, but because no one asked that question, they're not going to volunteer that information.
Right. Looking out for your people to make sure that they're mission ready, because if you're not personally ready or okay on that side, then you're not mission ready. So.
Oh, and to me, I think the biggest part of the mentor-mentee relationship is don't make it so formal. When some of the best conversations you've had is been when you've had nothing you come in there and there's a desk, there's paper, pencil, the whole 9 yards, everything's set up to be this formal back and forth conversation. But if you've gone to lunch with someone, or if you've had PT, or you've had an activity where you've been laughing, joking, having a good time, and there's been something that has been bugging you, or you just are curious about, someone that's at the event that you want to talk to, you find that without those barriers of the uniform sometimes or the workplace, you may have a more genuine conversation than you would have had otherwise.
Right. And I think that vulnerability is very powerful for a leader. At least I've learned when those who mentor me or lead me are vulnerable, I feel like I can also be vulnerable. Breaking down those formal walls, I feel like it's much easier to approach my leaders and mentors when I feel like I know them on that personal level as well.
You're spot on.
Yeah. Now I kind of want to talk about education, specifically professional military education and civilian education. It is so important. What are your thoughts on continuing education on both the military side and the civilian side?
Well, I think it's essential. And I say that not because I have, but I needed to. I think it's important because One, it shows initiative. Personal and professional growth and development doesn't happen unless you want to participate. And then when it comes to civilian education, that's really something that you have to make the decision that you're going to do. Not because you see it on a checklist that, hey, in order to get promoted, you need to do this, or to be considered for promotion, you need to do this. This has to be about you wanting to be a better version of yourself. And that goes right back to the mentor-mentee relationship. You making the decision to be a better version of yourself is what someone probably needs to see to understand that that's something that they can do too. In that civilian education, you also find that there's some things that you're not learning in the military that you can bring to the military to just open that aperture to be a more well-rounded leader. And that's what you get from civilian education that you add to your military education, is that you become a more well-rounded leader, because some of the things that are happening outside of the installation or outside of whatever organization you're part of, you can bring back there. And it helps you in your civilian career too. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I really believe that civilian education is very important because it becomes something that helps you become a more well-rounded person, both personally and professionally. And I say the same thing about military, professional military education. It gives you a better understanding of the culture of the United States Air Force and your organization in particular. There's something about some of the terms that you hear that may seem, I want to say boring. And if you'll notice, I'm very intentional about not using a lot of technical terms. And I don't like to, because I like to be able to relate to people. And what I mean by that is, when you get your professional military education and you look at the terms that are in there, there are a lot of terms that you are familiar with because of whatever AFSC that you're part of, or the organization or institution itself usually uses those terms all the time. Then you got to ask yourself, how do I use these to relate to the people that I want to motivate and guide to become a better version of themselves? Well, I take this information and I turn it into something that they understand and appreciate. And then I take that and I also have them to look at the organization or environment they're part of and say, this is why we do what we do and how this fits in to where you need to go to personally and professionally grow as a person. And then what you do is you have them be a part of it too. Never be always on the giving end of information and, of course, of facts. Always make sure that you pull people in. And this is part of professional military education to me too, is that when someone is growing from whatever skill level they're going into, or the different phases that they go through from being new accessions to being junior NCOs, mid-level NCOs to senior NCOs, there has to be a maturation process that they have to willingly be a part of. But professional military education usually helps them to understand or give them more insight as to what it actually means.
So do you think if people have opportunities to seek out professional military education, whether it's additional or just part of their career path, do you think that they should seek that out in every opportunity? And then do you think that it's important for them to try to attend in person, or do you think that they get the same benefits if they were to attend online?
Ooh, that second part is pretty controversial there.
I know that they're both very different. They both have their benefits, but I'm curious to know what you recommend.
So with the first part, absolutely, we need to seek out whatever opportunities to grow and develop as a person and as a professional that are available. It's difficult, especially when you're in the reserve component, because now we're talking about the fact that you have a career. You may or may not have a family, but there are other interests that you have, because the primary part of who you are and how you exist is that you're a civilian who has a part-time military career. So that's where a lot of your interests lie and a lot of your energy lies. But if you've decided that the National Guard, Air National Guard in particular, is going to be a part of who you are too, then that's an investment that you have to willingly make. Now, when it comes to whether or not you can actually do that full, in person, or, doing courses online, taking hybrid courses, things of that nature, it does become a challenge, because now you're thinking, hey, I do want to get promoted. I do want to find myself in a position to where I can get into this next, whatever job that may be, so that I can even lead, guide, and motivate more airmen. It can be frustrating at times, because it's like, one, I would love to go. There are not any more seats for me. That really, you may have to bleep this, but that sucks. Then there's this, I want to go, but the timing is just not right. I can only go during, this particular time, because one, I've got a career. And again, if you have a family, there's only a certain time that your kids are going to be out of school. And you want to make sure that you utilize your family care plan when you really need to, and not just for any reason other than what it's there for. But what you're alluding to when it comes to going in residence and making that the primary means of getting your professional military education, I think there's always going to go back and forth. And I say that because, those that are in the room, decisions are being made, have to really take into consideration that everyone that can be the best possible NCO or officer they can be are not going to be the ones that go in residence. It's going to be the person that's doing their absolute best in the job. And sometimes that becomes a very difficult thing. It can be frustrating at times, and it doesn't seem fair. And what we have to do is we have to enact whatever we can to get the job done to the best of our abilities. When the time comes that we can make those changes, then we do. I was looking at some of those questions you had, or at least some thoughts and ideas that you were going to go over with me. And it's almost like, hey, if you become king for a day or queen for a day, what would you do? And so you just never know. And right now, with PME, it's a challenge, it's a struggle, because we would all like to go in person if we could, or in residence if we could. Those of us that can't go, we still like that opportunity to get it when we need it, when we can, so that we can continue to grow and develop as a professional, and then of course obviously get promoted, and then of course make the changes as we need to when we can. And so that's what you'll do in the future of your career, is you'll make some changes that are going to be in the best interest of the folks that you've seen go through some of the challenges over the years, if that makes sense. I will tell you from my standpoint, this is not about PME, but, thinking about being king or queen for a day, thinking about all the years of sitting, in my workplace on the flight line or maybe on a foxhole. One of the things I thought was pretty cool was having an opportunity to have mess days added to the security forces career field. We didn't have them. And I thought it was pretty cool that, was able to advocate for them. Had great leadership that supported me in it. And so that's how we got mess days for security forces. And that wasn't just me. It was a team that helped me. Piece two is understanding where you are and the power that you have as an individual and part of an institution that can help make some of those changes when it comes to things like PME, where, hey, when are we going to be able to take a look at our drill status guardsmen, come in full circle, and look at what their needs are. Look at some of the challenges that they have, because over the last 24 years, the demands on a part-time service member has grown exponentially. But sometimes you're thinking, I'm sure, that, hey, are the people in the room thinking about what this means to us? There's a lot on our plate right now. There's a lot of time and effort that's being taken away, from some of the things that we're doing, civilian-wise, if you're a dual status guardsman. And now PME is something that they would like us to do in residence, but there aren't enough slots. There's not enough time. And if we do have the time, sometimes our organization doesn't have the money. Did I hit a couple nails on the head there?
Yeah, you did, sir. And I do appreciate how the Guard is flexible in most cases, because it needs to be. I mean, our DSGs are civilians first. They're their mothers, their fathers, their family members. They have a civilian career and they have a family. So it's critical that we do stay flexible and give different options so that we're able to retain them in our National Guard. Next, I kind of want to talk about your role right now and kind of your perspective on different things. So first, I'll kind of talk about what Chevrons is. So the Chevrons podcast is meant to speak to the enlisted experience, not just the Air Force experience, but of all services. I mean, we found that each branch or service may have different missions, different terms, different methods of training and preparing for their respective enlisted forces. But we found that our similarities far outnumber our differences most times. Yeah. Have you found this to be true with leading both airmen and soldiers in your position?
Oh, absolutely. I'll go back to before getting into this very unbelievably prestigious position to do what I'm doing. And my first experience in the joint world, if you will, was in Okinawa. And I was working, obviously, security police, as it would have been, and working with the 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa. And I learned a lot about how they policed totally different than we did. But at the end of the day, some of the training was the same. And then you started thinking back, wait a minute, our law enforcement academy in Texas, the Marines actually went through that. So It was all those things where it's like, oh, wow, okay. So they did get some of the same training that we did. And then you think about some of the institutional learning that you get from your different services, and you bring them to the center, and you realize that we do have a lot of unique things about us, but more importantly, we have so many more things that are very similar. And now having an opportunity to work with the Army and the Air now, what I see is some of the uniquenesses are things like, getting promoted, how they get promoted, how they set up for boards, things of that nature. But when it comes to values, the character that we expect out of our service members, some of the challenges they have with supporting their families, challenges in the workplace, going from, hey, I'm spending a lot of time away from my civilian career, and so my employer's getting a little frustrated about it. Those are some of the same challenges we have on both sides. Looking for opportunities in different places around the country through either Title 10 or ADOS, and the list goes on and on. Some of the same challenges. And then, of course, one of the things you find within the respective states is that one of the biggest challenges we have, and it's a similarity that we all have too, is our inability to communicate with each other because we think we're different.
I went to tech school. I went to Fort Meade. I went to the Defense Information School with all the branches were there, from Marines, Navy, Army, Coast Guard. Everyone was there. And while we were all different, we all had different uniforms on. It was my very first introduction to the military. We all had something in common, and that was able to connect each and every one of us. I was able to connect every single person in my classroom and in my school in a different way because we all had that one thing in common. So while it's very easy to focus on our differences, I think that one thing that we have in common, our decision to serve, allows us to unite and to join and to fight the same mission at the end of the day. And I think that's really amazing to see, something that you don't see really anywhere else.
You are spot on. That is the common core character trait that we have if in our members of the armed forces, is that, no matter what background we came from in life, even those that have had, moms, dads, the whole 9 yards, that have served and probably had better means of living than others, the desire to serve our country is something that has really been that linchpin for all of us as members of the armed forces. And I think our SEAC says it all the time. He says, we work from a joint operating picture every single day. And it's true, we do. And I see that from where I am in the Pentagon, more so than folks realize. And I think it's sometimes when it goes further down into the formations and the ranks, that's when a lot more of things that become more separate happen. But at the end of the day, we cannot function without one another.
Right. So how much of an impact did your joint professional military education courses prepare you for representing the Joint Enlisted Force of the National Guard?
So remember, I think in the beginning, I talked to you about, my beginnings, and what I learned I didn't realize was as a student of people. I think that's one of the biggest things I think we learn when we start working or operating in a joint environment, is understanding what makes people tick. And when we do, what we do is we find out that, one, that the character traits that we're looking for in those that we want to get the job done, and then those that we want to be leaders or make leaders, are pretty much the same. They're motivated for the very same reasons. And then we have those that have their own different motivations. But being able to operate in a joint environment is something that it happens initially by curiosity. You can be thrown into it, and you can still be airman so-and-so, and you can still think like an airman and never think for a moment that everything that's going around you can be, uniquely additive to you being a better NCO. And then you have those that understand, everything around me can make me a better leader, and help me to understand that, there are certain things that are going on around me. I need to understand it because I can't help this sailor be a better NCO, because they have them as well. And they call them petty officer, chief petty officers, or petty officers. If I don't take the time to understand exactly what makes him or her do what they do or motivate them. And sometimes you just can't, how do I put this? You can't be prepped for going into a joint environment. You have to just get there. And I've had a couple courses over the years that have taught me some of the things that I could have easily picked up a book and learned on my own. But being in that environment, in a classroom environment with folks that have helped me to understand that, it was totally different. And I'll tell you, the international leadership course that I went to at McGee Tyson, and it's one that's uniquely Guard, it was very, very enlightening. But what I'll tell you is it wasn't so much learning in a joint environment. It was just learning even in unique cultural norms that we don't think that we would understand and appreciate. It comes right back to the center of what you said when you talked about, just having the desire to serve. That's where it all comes from. And if you have that common desire, I think learning about the joint experience is something that becomes so much easier.
So with that being said, what advice do you have for any soldier or airman confronted with or considering a career in the joint force environment?
The last 24 years, and I think I mentioned that much earlier, we have operated from a joint perspective, since the first Gulf War. And I don't think we're going to change that. Our geographic combatant commands that we have around the world, they have all of our services there, and then our partners and allies as well. What I've seen is that, especially with the numbers that we have and some of the challenges that we're facing with our enemies, our near peer enemies around the world, it's going to take a combined environment and a combined thought process of people understanding, this is what skill set you bring to the table. These are the unique weapon systems that you have, and the list goes on and on of things that once we start incorporating them, that's how you develop a winning team. And if there's an opportunity for me to share anything with them about wanting to go into or thinking about going into a joint environment is, one, go for it, and two, do a little homework. And what you'll find is, again, more in common than you realize. And you talked about that yourself. And now, hitting home, the National Guard has the opportunity to do that first and foremost more than any of our services or any military component. And I say that because when you think about it, in your respective state, you've got Army and Air there. And you probably have some other services as well. Think about this. You have an opportunity every drill weekend to learn something unique or something more about the United States Army. It's only a matter of you taking the time to do it. Even if you say, well, we don't get a chance to go over there. You don't have to go over there. All you have to do is go on a computer. You've got a phone. You've got friends that you've learned about or you've gotten to know over the years that are part of the Army National Guard. Spend some quality time. When natural disasters happen, that's when you get an opportunity to learn more about your Army National Guard, Air National Guard. Also, when we have events that happen around the state, family days, and other events that bring you together, utilize that time to say, hey, tell me a little bit more about what your MOS is. Tell me about how you operate when you go downrange, or about the fact that it takes 2 years for you to go from start to finish before you go into your deployed operating environment. But there's a unique understanding of what that process is like, just like the new AFRIGEN model that we're going to be going to the United States Air Force, or should I say the Air National Guard, ultimately. You've got to understand what that means, but curiosity is the best start.
Right. You're seeking out those opportunities to learn from the different branches and doing your own research, too.
And don't be afraid, because I will tell you, some of our best leaders are those who've taken an opportunity when there wasn't an opportunity, and when they've kind of created one. When you see that there's that job that you may not want to have or that you don't like, they jump into those and they find out more and more and more about what that actually means. And it can't always be about a joint environment, but from that thought process, you can learn how going into a joint environment, you really, really thrive.
Yeah, I've experienced it firsthand, so I hope that every National Guard member gets the opportunity to work in a joint environment.
Wow, you've done a lot.
Only 2 years, but my tech school was 6 months at Fort Meade, and I learned so much. I mean, mostly we just kind of debated the differences between our PT tests and who had it easier, but beyond that, we learned a lot about each other, too.
That's awesome. And that's a pretty busy place over there at Fort Meade.
Yeah, it was a great experience. So we've heard that when you visit guardsmen in the field, which you do pretty often, one of your favorite things is to hear their stories about why they joined. And as public affairs, that is a shared sentiment. We love to hear other people's stories, telling their stories. So what is it about meeting these soldiers and these airmen that inspire you most?
How do I put this? I've been doing this for 4 decades, and I think one of the coolest things to learn is that there are people who really love what they do. And then when I hear their stories, it just reinforces the narrative that I believe that we've got some of the greatest people in the world that are serving in our armed forces. You hear those narratives about folks that, from people that, people don't have the propensity to serve. I don't buy that. Because when you talk to someone, especially as I listen to you, you find that we got a lot of young Americans that just want the opportunity to serve. They want to hear the truth. And then when they do join an institution like ours, they just want to be given a chance to do and to be their absolute best. And you hear that when you see them. And I say that way because, when they start talking about the job that they've joined for and they get to do it, they get a big smile on their face. When you start asking them questions about who their family is, about, where they came from, they're very proud of that because they're proud of the fact that wherever they came from, now it's part of a bigger institution. Our armed forces is made up of so many people in so many different walks of life, but you see it in the individual because somebody has always joined for a different reason than the person next to them. But at the end of the day, when they get together and you see them either eating chow, breaking a sweat at PT, or just doing the work that they've been hired to do, whether it be an MOS or an AFSC, they all seem to be from the same place.
As public affairs too, that is my favorite thing to do, is ask people their story and watch them light up when they talk about things that they're passionate about or explaining what their job is and just what they do day to day. Most people that I talk to get very excited and very happy to share all that they want to share. So that's something that I also enjoy doing. And I appreciate when leaders such as yourself do the same because it makes us feel heard and makes us feel important and that we have a purpose in the Guard, and also that you care about where we come from and what our story is, and you're able to amplify our voices as well. So we kind of talked about this briefly about how the National Guard is a family. But at the same time, it's also just as important to have a family outside of the military that supports you. I know that my parents wouldn't have been able to both stay in the Guard if they didn't have a supportive family that helped with childcare or just supported them when they had to go away or had to respond to something. How important would you say having supportive families are for Guardsmen specifically?
So that's a really, really cool question for so many reasons. And I tell you what, you really you lob them good. It's a good question because it's not just the family that we know that exists. It's a family that's created once we join the Guard. But we'll talk about the one that we know that exists. Mom, dad, husband, wife, kids, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Those who know who we are and what we've decided to do, and they're very proud of us, and they know it because we'll share it as often as we can. We'll shout it from the rooftop. I think family is important because they share probably some of the same ideals that you do have, and the opportunity that you have to display those is something that really resonates with them, and it makes them very proud. And so if they can support you in any way, they can. And it gets tough at times. We talked about the last 24 years, but it's been that way since, we've had our National Guard since 1636, where you've got a person that has a job one place and they've got to put down the plow and then pick up the musket and they'll go do the fight. It takes that one being back home to be able to make sure that things are continuing to happen so that you can focus on the fight. Because when you take your focus off the fight and you're thinking about home, then that has a way of lessening the defense that we have for our country. And we never want that to happen. So, we have programs in place to help, but more importantly, we've got people in place. And I don't mean people in uniform. I'm talking about people in the civilian community that really, really love the civilian, or should I say the citizen soldier and the citizen airman. And we have employers too that really appreciate that too. And so that's why we have, even with the challenges, we have those that will hire, our Guardsmen knowing that, hey, this guy or this gal is going to be going down range, more often than we'd like them to. But we see the quality of person that they are and what that means to us to be able to live in a free and democratic society. So they will get support from us. And it just resonates through so many people. And oftentimes, I don't think we realize how many people, they don't come up and say thank you for their service, but they show it in ways that that we'll never, ever understand or we'll ever, never know. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's the big family piece. The Guard family piece of those in uniform, oh wow, that's something that you can almost get emotional about. And I say that because you think about the people that you joined and you get to know over the years. It really, really mean something to you when you see things happen in their lives, changes that happen, those monumental growth experiences that they have. This is a great question, but I'm going to talk about something that's kind of serious. One of the things I do is when I get a notice of a suicide from one of the states is I will call the state command senior enlisted leader. And I call for a couple of reasons. One is I want to call and see if there's anything from the National Guard perspective that we can offer by way of support. Two, I call to check on that command senior enlisted leader too, because when you think about growing up in the Guard and the family that you develop by being a part of the Guard, that senior enlisted leader knows that airman or that soldier. They've known them when they join at the age of 18. They know them when they're old enough to drink and drive. They know them when they become a husband or a wife, or just they get involved with someone. They know them when they buy their first home, their first car, when they graduate from college, when they make those life-changing choices that make them a better person. And then if they're gone, they experience that too. And it's everybody in the chain that experiences that. But the reason I asked the SEL about it is because every time that there's a death notice, he or she is a part of getting to know, how do I help a family get through something like this? But they're also experiencing that death themselves. That's a member of their family that's going. So we watch a lot happening as a person becomes a member of the Guard, as they become a member of our family. And something as tough as that, when that happens, that reminds us just how much we appreciate and value each and every person that's a part of our formation.
Right. And back to your point, I wouldn't be able to serve without the support of my family, and I know that in the future I'm going to need that support, but I didn't realize how impactful it would be to join the National Guard and just the family that you immediately built. I mean, I've already met people on this base that I think I'll know for a very long time, that I hold as very close friends, and I see my senior leaders who have known each other since they were airman basics or first lieutenants at that point. They just have known each other for so long, and I can see myself having those relationships and that family one day in the Guard. And I think that is so unique to the National Guard, just because you stay in one place for so long and you grow up with your fellow Guard members for as long as you decide to stay in, and you are invested in their personal lives as well, because we spoke about how important it is to check in on each other and invest in each other's personal lives so that we know when to support them and how to support them. So that is something so unique in the National Guard and so special.
And you yourself are a living testament to that too, because I don't know, and I can only assume that you probably had an opportunity for people to see you be a part of your mom's life or your parents' life, to see what it was like out there on the base, as a kid, and then all of a sudden you're one of them now. So
I'll go on to the next question. With hundreds of thousands of enlisted members of the National Guard, which you all lead, how do you focus your energy on the most important issues that impact their personal and professional lives? We kind of talked about a few of them just now, but where do you focus your energy most, and how do you find what's most important?
So the Chief of the National Guard Bureau has priorities that we all know about, and if not, I'm going to tell you right now: people, readiness, modernization, and reform. And those are the guiding principles as to how we move out as leaders in the National Guard, and hopefully come up with policies and procedures that help us to move our forces in whatever direction that may be. And when we get away from that, let me rephrase that, we don't get away from that. When we utilize that to come up with our own, for me as a Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief, and having the enlisted force as my responsibility, I thought about what that would mean to me. What would I do if I had an opportunity to help shape some of the thoughts and ideas and the narratives of how we move out? And so came up with, and it's the 3 ECHO, if you've never heard about it before. It's called Educate, Empower, and Execute. And I use that as my guiding principles, even with this conversation today. And again, part of it is to use terms that are relatable to everyone that's listening to me. But when we go back to 3 ECHO, which is, again, Educate, Empower, and Execute, what I'm saying is any duty or responsibility that you have, any mission or job that you're going to get, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to learn it, whatever that may be. And the more we learn, the more diverse we become in our thoughts, in our abilities. But we learn. We learn the job. We become subject matter experts. after the education piece takes place, you're hungry enough to where you want to put these into play. So you go from the from learning to the application piece, and the application piece is the empowerment piece. And I tell you what, I can't think of a better way to grow and develop our enlisted force than to watch them to become empowered in what they do. The empowerment piece gives them confidence. It gives them the ability to believe that, hey, my leadership trusts me. It's a double-sided, I want to call it a double-sided coin. Most of them are anyway. And you think about this, there's a trust factor that's built in your leaders, and there's a trust factor built in subordinates when you become an NCO. You're in that middle place, a unique place where you're the interpreter for the senior non-commissioned officers to the non-commissioned officer corps and to your airmen or to your young soldiers. Empowerment piece also gives you a chance to try new things because they trust you. Look at ideas that you can see that, hey, this may work. This may work. And that's where the trust factor comes in. Empowerment is an amazing thing. It also affords you the opportunity to use those things that you were talking about, your professional military education and your civilian education. The empowerment piece says, I am going to use this position that I'm in. I'm going to use this growth and development that I have to become a better version of myself. And I'm going to look around for opportunities to make efficient and effective decisions in my organization, whether they work or not, but I'm going to give it a try. And I'm also going to do the same thing for my subordinates. That's what guides me. That empowerment piece, you cannot get away from it without realizing how important it is for us, moving out on a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, educate, empower, and execute. Becoming subject matter experts is extremely important, but also growing and developing as an NCO, growing and developing as a person will have you thinking, you know what, I'm good at this. It is time for me to do something else, and I need to move out of the way so someone else can move up and take my place. That 3 echo is important because you can use it in every scenario that you think about. And I say that, and that was a long way to get to getting back to what I think about in our non-commissioned officer corps. What I wanted our non-commissioned officer corps to understand and know in this 4 years that I've been in is I wanted them to know about the National Guard as a whole. I wanted them to know that I was explaining to the world about who we are as the National Guard. And that we had a senior non-commissioned officer who was in charge that wanted to make sure that it wasn't just coming from the officer corps. I also wanted the enlisted corps to understand and appreciate who they are as individuals and that they're empowered to do great things. We talked about some of the things that you can do from the joint perspective, but also from the SPP perspective, to where we've got NCOs that are involved in a great work with our partner nations and allies. Also, I think I may be going off on this a little bit, but also because we're talking about bilateral affairs non-commissioned officers. I think that's a unique perspective on the empowerment piece to where we have these BAOs, as they call bilateral affairs officers. You can tell it's difficult to say, but they've been around for years, and they've been the ones that have been working on those relationships, with our partners, nations, and our partner nations and allies around the world. But we have NCOs that are capable of doing that. That's important to me, understanding and appreciating and promoting the capabilities of our non-commissioned officer corps. That's just one of the reasons, or one of the examples. It can go with our JEDI course that we're starting, the Joint Enlisted Development Initiative, to where we're learning about the joint environment and where we have NCOs that have created the course, NCOs driving the course, and NCOs making sure that the other NCOs are better because of the course. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But I'm empowered and excited about leading our enlisted force through educating them on whatever we can, coming up with other opportunities. And I can list those forever, but I know that we will have a short period of time. And then empowering us, and then hearing from people like yourself that really empowers me to want to go out and do more for you. And then, of course, again, the execute piece is to get out of the way, let you do what you do best so you can learn and grow. And then just like when you wash your hair, it's wash, rinse, and repeat. So once we know our jobs, we're empowered to do our jobs, we do our jobs, and we learn and we're good at it, we're going to teach it, and then we're going to go back over and we're going to learn another job, and we'll do the same thing. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's very inspirational to hear all you've been focusing on and all of your efforts over the last 4 years. And I'm interested to know, with all you've seen throughout this experience and all you've been focusing on and all that you've been able to do, What do you hope to see for the future of the National Guard?
There's this thing called a value proposition to where the National Guard itself is supposed to be a less expensive means of getting after what we need to do as far as our nation's defense. We're part of a bigger picture to make sure that we can defend our nation, and again with our partners and allies. I'd love to see a few more full-time positions, and the reason I say that in unique places is that we have a great perspective, not only from the military lens, but from a civilian lens, that helps us to become a unique and very, very important piece of the decision-making body. And I don't think we have enough opportunities out there. So we've been working on getting more out there. I'd love to see us in places, in our geographic and band commands. We have a few, but I'd love to see a few more of us out there, because the fight that we have had over the last 24 years is not a fight that's going to stop. It's going to take our entire total force. And no one understands, again, that joint mindset better than our National Guard, because we grow up in it. We know how to really relate to people very quick, fast, in a hurry. We know how to get the best out of people. We know how to become family very fast, but we also know how to be effective fighters, because we are some of the most unbelievable subject matter experts in our career fields, whether it be an LOS or an AFSC. You think about folks that work on planes, that work on helicopters, in civil engineering, that do whatever they do in our National Guard. They have done it. They have done it in one location for quite a few years. So they become very good at what they do. I would love for the rest of the world to see us as that force to be reckoned with. We are getting there, and I think we will continue to head in that path. You're going to see more of that. You're going to see more of our National Guard being recognized, not just for the fact that we're a part-time force that has really a full-time commitment. You're going to see a National Guard that's going to be recognized for the great skill sets that they bring to the table, the subject matter expertise they have in areas that sometimes we don't think are those intrinsic values that make us good leaders, like emotional intelligence. Because in order to get the best out of a soldier, airman, sailor, Marine, Coastie, or our Coast Guard or Guardian, our Space Guardian, it's going to take a leader that understands their job, understands how someone is motivated to do their absolute best at their job, and then get the best out of them while they're doing it. And nobody does that better than a guardsman.
With all of that said, and all that we've accomplished so far just in the last couple decades, I'm very optimistic about the future of the National Guard, and I'm very happy to hear you say that. Now, for our very last question, I want to give you the opportunity to impart any last words of wisdom or anything that you would like to share with the enlisted force of the National Guard.
Wow. I think you got it all out of me today. But I just have a couple thoughts. I wrote them down. I wanted to make sure, because I'm getting a little older now, so I forget things sometimes. I would say, for the first, don't be mediocre. You know as well as I do, when you're standing in front of people that are not giving their best, don't let that become the example for you. We can all find people that can teach us how to get by or how to get over, but we need people in our life that know how to teach us how to get ahead. And you need to be able to live that example, and that goes to the educate, empower, and execute piece. But when you're in the presence of mediocrity, get away from it. And every now and again, look in the mirror, and if you're being mediocre yourself, you may need to get that pep talk from you or from somebody that'll tell you the truth. Don't be mediocre. Don't be afraid of ambition. Ambition is extremely important to me because, when you think in terms of ambition, some people will tell you need to slow down. You've done too much or you're going too fast. And the reality is, if you're doing it for the greater good and you're taking people along with you for the right reasons, that's the direction you need to go, because our organization needs that. And if we don't get that, we won't have those leaders that understand that we have got to continue to press forward. We can't go steady as she go. Steady as she go means that there's somebody still driving the ship. And those driving the ship needs to be the people that understand that we do what we do for the greater good, and you have to be ambitious to do it. Ambition is not a bad word as long as it's for the greater good. And then, of course, understand and employ emotional intelligence. I just talked about it a moment ago, so I don't have to really get into it again, but I think it's important for you to understand how to get the best out of your folks, and then get out of the way and let them be the best at who they are. because if we try to completely guide and keep them in a box, we'll never get the best out of them. Creativity, innovation comes from folks that have the belief that their folks will back them, that their leaders will back them. So you've got to be able to do that. So get out of the way, let them be their best. And you do that by understanding emotional intelligence and knowing how to get the best out of them. Take care of yourself. I didn't do so well at that. I was doing great at the beginning, and every now and again, I mess it up. I have a stent in my chest because I probably didn't listen to the doctor when I needed to. But I understand what it means now to make sure that I have to be an example. We're not perfect, and you cannot be perfect, and you should not try to have people believe that you are perfect. But the example that you want for people to follow has to be the example that they see when you walk through the door. Any other is not really you, and if it's not really you, then you can't expect them to be themselves when they show up every day. And I talked about being present. Okay? And then, of course, take care of your family. After all this is gone, some of us have done some things. We've made some challenges or changes in our life, but take care of your family, because when this is all done, 20, 30, 40 years, you want to make sure that those that have been on that ride with you are there when it's done. And they need to know that the investment that you've made, that they've made, it meant as much to you as it meant to them. That's it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Chevrons Podcast with SEA Tony Whitehead. Let us know what you thought about the episode and follow along with the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at chevrons.podcast. And don't forget to subscribe.